Hello and welcome to Sri Lanka 99.94 Cricket Every Day. My name is Mark Machado from the Maryland and I'm joined as always by Estelle Devon from the Papare. Sri Lanka 99.94 is your new home for Sri Lankan content. We're dropping into your podcast feed and on YouTube and the 99.94 app several times every week. So please do rate, review and subscribe. Thanks for joining Cricket's Conversation. Estelle, we are talking today about the climax of the Lanka Premier League. It's been an absolutely great third edition, and like with the first and second editions, Jaffna have won the tournament again. What was you kind of going into the tournament? Me and you both suspected that they'll be the team to beat. They didn't have it all their own way through the tournament. They lost to Candy a couple of times. But when it really mattered, they got those wins, right? Were you expecting anything different? Estelle, give us your thoughts on that final today between Jaffna and Colombo.
Yeah, you're right. We kind of looked at the teams before the tournament, and the thinking was that Jaffna would do well. And obviously, this time around, it seemed like all the squads are kind of more balanced. I would say I'd be really disappointed with the way Gaul and Damula performed, and rightly, they were the first two teams to be knocked out. Jaffna have a knack of winning the big games, don't they? And we saw that in the previous two seasons as well. When it was necessary, when they needed to step up, they've done it. So in this tournament as well, Candy were the kind of the team of the tournament after that league stage. They won every game except for one, and they looked like they would go all the way. Ended up not even making the final. So Jaffna, I think, just when it comes to those pressure situations and pressure games, the important times, that they just have kind of the experience as well as the type of players who can pull off those wins for them.
Yeah, it's how often we see in these big franchise tournaments the kind of pace-setting team fall away at the final or the penultimate hurdle. We kind of saw that with Candy, right? Because Candy was superb for much of it, but then when it came to it, they couldn't get those wins in that they needed in the playoff, and they're eliminated to get to the final. They basically had two shots at it and messed it up. I always wonder. This is why I'm not a big fan of this whole the top two can still lose that first game and still have another chance to make it in. Because I think once you've lost that first game, once they lost Jaffna, they kind of lost momentum. And then you play against that Colombo side, which is full of, and we'll get onto this in a bit more, but it's full of players who have a lot of experience and can really tighten the screws when things aren't going right, and they just kind of came totally undone at that key moment, right?
I disagree. I think it's a massive advantage, them finishing first and getting that qualifier plus eliminator, because they had a second shot at it. If it was a semi-final scenario where you lose the semi-final and you're out, then they would have been out, right? But of course, like, you look at it, they would probably have faced Gaul Gladiators, because Gladiators finished fourth on the table at the end of the league stage. So maybe they would have had a better chance of making it through. But I think this system is fair in the sense, or like, I mean, Candy can have no gripe about it because they had two opportunities to go through. Colombo had to play, all out 3 days in a row. But they had an opportunity to kind of take stock of things and regroup and play the next game. I think they were a bit unlucky against Jaffna because it was a rain interrupted game and they didn't get like the full complement of overs with the ball. And they are, of course, a good bowling side. So they must have felt a little bit hard done by that, but that's the weather, right? You can't control that. I think I don't have a problem with the playoff system, and I don't think Candy should either, because I think they had an advantage. Unfortunately, they had 2 bad days in a row and had to go out.
Can we talk about the final? 163 is what Colombo made. 163 for 5. I thought, to me, that looked like a decent score. They've rebuilt their innings after losing wickets when kind of moments when you're going to crack on here and get a big score. The kind of main run scores for them were Chandimal, Asalanka, and Ravi Bopara. I mean, Ravi Bopara is one of my favourite English cricketers, and that's not because he owns a chicken shop locally to me. But he's exciting to watch, and he's actually, I think he's played in every edition of the Lanka Premier League. He's scored lots of runs in the Lanka Premier League as well. They managed to keep the strike rate quite high, and then Jaffna come in, maintain the kind of strike rate that they need to score those runs, but are still kind of losing wickets, but still manage to just do what they need to do. Right? I mean, we've talked a lot about this Jaffna side, but that final win was actually quite extraordinary when you break it and you look at the actual figures, right?
Yeah, and again, I think we spoke about this, the importance of having someone like Gurbaz at the top of the order. I think he got something like 30 of 16 deliveries at the top. And suddenly the equation, when he was dismissed, if I am not mistaken, was something like 115 of 95, right? So from 164 of 120, to bring the equation down, already you're ahead of the game at that point, and maybe the opposition is already thinking about losing the game. So that's, I think, why he's such an important player to the Jaffna side. You look at the top run scorers, he's probably not among the top 5, but just the impact he makes with his runs helps guys like Avishka Fernando come in there and take their time and kind of play that anchor role. Avishka, of course, named player of the match yesterday, but I think a lot of credit for that innings should be given to someone like Gurbaz. I think they complement each other well, because from Gurvas's point of view, he kind of knows that Avishka is not going to give away his wicket that easily. So he can go out there and go after the bowling. And on the opposite end, Avishka knows that he can take his time a little bit, so long as, Gurbaz is at the crease. Another guy, Sadira Samaravikrams, I'm really, really happy that he was named player of the series, because for once, the player with the most runs wasn't given the award, but they were actually looking at people who made a difference to their teams and played some match winning knocks. And Samara Vikrama, I think if you look at the entire tournament as a whole, as a middle order batter, he's had such a massive impact. If you look at run scorers list, you don't see that many middle order batters in the LPL who have done well. So that's a massive thing for him. And for a guy coming in, like I said, I heard that he was told he's not being considered for limited overs cricket by SLC at the moment. For a guy who has been told that, to come and put in that kind of performance, just incredible. I was just looking through kind of his numbers. Last season, he wasn't even picked in the draft last season, right? He was a late addition to the Gladiators side, then played just one game, made a duck. And here he comes into Jaffna, and he's been, of course, he's named player of the tournament, but he's been such a massive, like, the impact he's had is so big, because you don't expect a guy like him. He's very much in the kind of Dhananjay De Silva mold type of batsman. But the way he was able to score quickly, I think, was massive. Even yesterday's game, just the similar to Gurbaz, he allowed Avishka Fernando to kind of take his time and stay at the crease because of the way he played. So that's, I think, 3 key people in yesterday's win for the Jaffna Kings.
Coming off the back of the World Cup, one of the criticisms was that the strike rate for Sri Lanka, for too many of Sri Lanka's batters, was too low. The scores in almost every game, apart from a couple of exceptions, were pretty high, with high strike rates, right? Do we know? Have you heard anything? If this was, something that people are trying to address, they were like, we want the players to score big. We're overvaluing keeping our wicket at the moment. We don't need to be doing that. Or do we think this is something that just come out from the players naturally, and they're just thought to push on to the next level to make that impact? We need to score big runs quickly, because I mean, we talked about Avishka there as an anchor. It strikes me that Sri Lanka at the moment has probably about 4 or 5 players who can play that anchor role really well, right?
Yeah, I think it's completely natural. I'm not sure there was much of a kind of a push from definitely not Sri Lanka cricket, but maybe it was definitely part of Jaffna's plan, I think, to have Gurbaz go after the bowling. You saw him yesterday in the first over. I'm not sure if you watched the game, but or you were able to watch yesterday. But if you watch it, like from the first over onwards, he's just trying to take on the bowling.
So I did watch it. I didn't watch it live, and I didn't watch it legally, but I have watched it.
Yeah, how could you miss that final, right? It was a great game. Uh, just that
Exactly.
Kandambi's and the Jaffna management's plan seemed to be that one player sticks around and the other guy goes after the bowling. And that's how it kind of worked out with Gurbaz and Avishka. But I don't think there was ever an overall kind of push um, towards that kind of that enforcer style of play. I think it just comes naturally to guys like Sadira Samaravikrama, even Nuanidu Fernando. I thought was very very impressive right throughout. Um, so you're right. Like if you look at the Sri Lankan team, there are so many openers available, and it seems like all of them play that one kind of role. Which is why I think during the World Cup we saw a little bit of a change in Kusal Mendis. He did take on that kind of enforcer kind of role in both the Asia Cup and the World Cup. So I don't think they're at a stage where both batters go after the bowling like we see from teams like England. But at least one guy is definitely trying to score at a higher pace now than rather than stay at the wicket and hold keep wickets in hand.
And the other thing that I think is so striking, and it's something we've mentioned on this podcast before, is how sophisticated some of the tactics are getting, and how resilient the teams are becoming. Right, because if you go back and look at domestic T20 cricket in Sri Lanka 3, 4 seasons ago, or even the beginning of the LPL, once they start losing wickets, it seems to all quickly fall apart. But now we're seeing quite regularly that rebuilding of innings. We saw it with Jaffna win the title with rebuilding innings. They win the title with a bowler scoring a boundary. Right, that was just shows that players are thinking about the skills that they need to play at the higher levels of T20 cricket, and it's brilliant to see. I also want to talk about the management of Jaffna Kings, because we've talked about how they've been the most consistent team. They've won it 3 years in a row, which is almost unheard of in any T20 tournament, right, around the world. But now you look at Kandambi, you look at Thisara Perera, and you think these are guys who probably should be in given the opportunity. And I'm not just saying for the national side, I'm saying for other T20 franchises around the world to go and prove out that they can do that in other places, right?
Yeah, I think.
And I for one, would love to see that.
Yeah,
Go
I saw a tweet earlier today from Lasit Malinga mentioning that it is time for someone like Tilna Kandambi to get an opportunity to join the national setup, which I thought that's a huge endorsement, right? From a guy like Malinga. He's played around the world. He knows what he's talking about when it comes to T20 franchise cricket. So if he's endorsing someone like Kandambi, there's definitely something to look at if you hadn't realized it already. I mean, he's won 3 LPLs as coach. He captained the Uvanex team in the OG, the original LPL, the SLPL back in 2012. So he's definitely got something going for him. And I think just even that, the tactic of sending Binura Fernando in at that moment, I think in most games, Biaskant would probably have come up ahead of him. But they realized that at that point they need a boundary in that over. Even Tikshana was sent in, I believe, with the kind of the license to just swing as hard as you can and get a boundary in those last two deliveries. Unfortunately, he was run out, but so that's the kind of I think the intent focused play that Kandam is pushing rather than maybe give the strike to Thisara Perera, let him get the runs for you. Just your job is to run, get him on strike. You tell the bowler, look, you have nothing to lose. Go for a boundary those last two deliveries. If it comes through, then we are chasing a very small target in the last over, and like chances are you're going to do it successfully, right? And that's exactly what we saw yesterday. Binura Fernando, I was thinking look, this guy could hardly manage to finish his 4 overs, right? He was holding on to his side, his back. He looked in really, he looked in pain. But
Bad shape. Yeah.
yeah, and they sent him in. You're thinking, oh gosh, how's he gonna run? How's he gonna kind of handle himself? But his job was get that boundary, that one boundary, and then match was basically won in that penultimate over.
Also, the other thing I just will say about Jaffna as a final thing is that everyone just looks like they're having a great time, which I know sounds like flippant, and people say they are a group of young men who get paid to play cricket, something that everyone would love to do. But there's so many times you see, particularly in franchise cricket, you see players and you see teams, and they just do not look like that. They go through the motions, right? But everyone seems to be so well engaged with it. They all absolutely seem to just love it, and they're all playing for each other. And as you say, that maybe that Benura Fernando getting that four to finish the game is the ultimate example of it, right? He comes out, we know that he's not in the greatest shape and fitness in that moment, but he comes out and gets the job done because he wants the dirt for everyone, right? And then you see the way they celebrate on social media; they all love it, and this is why the Lanka Premier League is the greatest T20 franchise tournament in the world because of the sheer passion involved in it and in the players, right? Yeah, I just think there's got to be people looking at Telankan Dumby and just going, he deserves a chance. But in the like, I'll be honest, I don't think he's going to get an IPL. They're not going to let him manage an IPL team this season. But he should be looking. And I don't know how any of this works. I don't know if he's contracted to SLC, so I don't know if they'll let him do this. But I think he should be looking to try and go over and coach in the UAE or in South Africa or Bangladesh with 100. There's so many other franchise tournaments around the world that he could try and get involved in, and you just look at that record and you think, yeah, he's got to try and push on. And Sri Lankan coaches are in vogue, right? The IPL, two of the teams are headlined by looked after by admittedly Sri Lankan legends of the game, not just Sri Lankan legends of the game, but people do give Sri Lankan former Sri Lankan players a chance. So I think his time is coming, and it's definitely, if you're a Sri Lankan cricket fan, I think it's only a matter of time before he gets the national team job. But I do think it would be nice for him to go get experience elsewhere before he gets that job. Just because different places have different cultures. How quickly can he turn it around? Inevitably, he's going to get the Sri Lankan job at a moment of there being some sort of crisis within the team. He's, no one's ever going
But
to
Sri Lanka
leave
cricket
the job
don't like local
in a
head
good
coaches, do
place.
they? So I don't know how inevitable that is
No,
because they don't seem to like having a local coach as head coach for very long. So why not? Why not? Why
surely
not go
though.
in for a women's team? Matthew Mott's had huge success, hasn't he?
Yeah,
He won a
yeah,
World Cup.
maybe,
Yeah,
maybe,
that could be the platform
yeah.
that Kandambi is looking like he needs because, like you said, it's unlikely that he's going to get the IPL. I don't know what he's focused on, whether it's franchise leagues only or T20 cricket only or whatever. But why not look at some of the women's teams, not just Sri Lanka but around the world? He's definitely he has the kind of the record to back him up. It's about you know familiarizing yourself with the women's game, um, and all the little complexities that come with that. And maybe then there's an opportunity further down the line with one of the men's teams as well. Just kind of a thought, because just looking at Matthew Mott, that seems like that seems a pathway for someone like Kandambi too.
Well, is there? Do we know who the coach is taking the team to South Africa when the World Cup, the women's side to South Africa for the World Cup in February? I mean, what's Tilan Kandambi up to in February? I heard South Africa's lovely that time of year. Why don't they just give it to him and let him take him? Like, what have we got to lose at this stage? Nothing. If they don't have a coach, let him do it. right?
Yeah, I wouldn't mind seeing that, but of
Should we
course,
take a break?
it's also it's not the same as coaching a men's team, right? There's so many other little complexities involved in that. But yeah,
But it isn't. But ultimately, it's coaching is coaching, right? It's the same. It's the same game. It's the same rules. All right, the boundaries are slightly further in, but it's the same kind of tactics, right? And the challenge of coaching is being able to go to different environments and to get them to perform. And as you say, maybe he follows that Matthew Mott route, or hopefully, if he does win a World Cup, it's not with Australia or
hopefully
England.
it's not with England. My
It's
gosh.
with Sri Lanka. Right, so not too bad. Gosh, it could be worse. It could be Australia. Um, anyway, should we take a break there? Then we should talk about the standout players this tournament.
You're listening to Cricket's Conversation on 99.94. Whatever your team, we have the show for you on podcast, YouTube, or on the 99.94 app. We have India, England, South Africa, West Indies, and now Sri Lanka covered. If you want to find us, the best way is to follow us on social media at 9994DM by downloading the 9994 app or Google 99.94 on podcast. We speak cricket.
So Estelle, we're talking about the Lanka Premier League. That's just concluded. Do we want to give our 11s?
Yep, let's go for it.
Shall I let you go first? And then I will.
Make one
I think
now.
the way we'll do this, because I don't have mine written down. Yeah, I'll let you go first, and I'll tell you which ones I disagree with.
Okay.
Basically,
Okay.
I think that's the way to do it. Yeah.
So, just before I name the 11, I will say I'm not very sure about some of the picks, but I think you'll agree with me on most. So, I've got Gurbaz and Avishka opening the batting, Kamindu Mendis at 3, Sadira Samaravikrama at 4, and he will take the gloves. Then I've got Ravi Bopara, who I did not see myself picking, but I have in the end. Bopara at 5, Nuanindu Fernando at 6. I picked Thisara Perera at 7, and he will, of course, be captain. Carlos Brathwaite at 8, Vyaskant at 9, Kasun Rajitha at 10, and Nuan Thisara at 11.
So there's no space for Asalanka or for Angelo Mathews.
No.
Both were absolutely incredible. Or Andre Fletcher as well. He's the other one that I think
Andre
deserves
Fletcher,
at least an honourable mention.
Yeah, so Andre Fletcher, I considered, I think it would have been between Gurbaz and Fletcher for me. I just felt like, just looking at his runs, he has 260 something runs, and 105 came in one innings, right? But you can argue that, okay, that's why you pick him, to get that big score. But I felt between him and Gurbaz that Gurbaz was definitely the better pick.
Yeah, I think Gurbaz kind of gets things going. Also, Gurbaz is he's played in every edition, hasn't he? Actually, has Andre Fletcher played in every edition? I can't remember.
No, he hasn't. I think this was his
but
first
Gurbaz, maybe. Gurbaz and Ravi Bopara seem to me as like the two most, when you think of the foreign signings in the LPL, they're the two that come to mind straight away. It's a shame Samit Patel wasn't involved this season as well. I love Ravi Bopara, and as I mentioned earlier, if you know, I'd consider giving him a Sri Lankan passport and taking him on tour. No, I wouldn't really. We don't need him. There's enough other players, but he's about as the most Sri Lankan player you'll ever get from England, right? He plays in many ways just like a Sri Lankan player, or classical Sri Lankan player does. The other player who has impressed me a lot this tournament, and I've seen him at quite a few franchise tournaments, and he's never really lit it up. I think this has been the tournament that he's had his biggest impact for. Has been Benny Howes, where he's been quite consistent with bowling, and he's also got runs as well, which I know he's done sporadically, but I think this is about as consistent as he seems to have been. Can you remind me of who your bowlers were again?
So
did you pick
Thisara, Rajitha, Vyaskant, Brathwaite, and between Thisara, Perera, Bopara, and Kamindu Mendes, you get your fifth bowler.
Okay. So I'm not really sure about Kamindu Mendes as a bowling option, but
No, but
I suppose that's
he's
the
in my
way.
team basically on his batting form. I thought he was excellent at number 3 for Candy. But he of course offers that kind of
Yeah.
1 or 2 overs that he can bowl. Just if the team needs him.
Yeah, I think he's one of those players who, as a number of other Sri Lanka players are going to do, is causing a headache for the selectors, right? Because coming into this series, I think he looked well out of contention for any white ball, for any white ball teams. And now I think he's, if we were picking a squad off the back of what we've seen, he's definitely put his hand up for it, right?
Yeah, I think so. But also, I think Sri Lanka cricket will be a little bit. Personally, I don't think they should make all their decisions based on the LPL, because obviously roles and you know so many things are different from playing in a franchise league versus playing for the national team. So I don't think they should base all their decisions on the LPL and performances on the at the LPL. But definitely, Kamindu is kind of a guy they have looked at in the past, and he just doesn't seem to have gotten any impactful performances in. Maybe he's not. The problem here is, I think, is that and I saw a lot of team of the tournament kind of things, and one of my biggest pet peeves is when people pick people who have scored runs in a particular position and then put them somewhere else, right? And I think Kamindu is one of those guys who has suffered as a result of something like that when he comes into the national team, because he's essentially coming in to plug a gap, right? He's coming in just to kind of Sri Lanka cricket brings him in when somebody's injured or somebody's, not available. So
Yeah.
then he's there, not necessarily in the position that he would have made most of his runs domestically. So I think that has been a problem in the past. Here, he was able to bat in the top order, and he was then able to kind of, make an impact. So I don't know whether those positions in in the Sri Lankan team are really open for him to kind of make it come back in and make an impact in. But definitely, I think guys like Samaravikrama and Mendes have probably got the selectors thinking again of them in the white ball setup.
Can we talk about players who've, I don't want to say disappointed, but have maybe not had a great a tournament as we were expecting? The two that come to mind straight away are Barnaka Rajapaksa and Darshan Shanaka. They were kind of expected to score big runs for their franchise and get down below all the way to the end. They were those two didn't have great tournaments. Barnaka is back being, after his heroics at the Asia Cup, he's back being quite a divisive figure for fans and social media. For some reason, there's people debating on whether or not Dustin Shanaka should still be white ball captain. This is his performances this tournament have obviously fed the doubters. It's not been great for either of those two, right?
I think Dasun Shanaka didn't have as bad a tournament with like the bat as you would think just looking at Dambula's performances. It's just that they really sucked during the tournament, didn't they? They were terrible. I think apart from Jordan Cox, batting really didn't get going. Shanaka was able to put in a few good and at number 6, I don't know like whether you can expect 50s and 60s and those kind of knocks, right? Essentially their role is to finish the game. Ideally they should be coming into bat with 6-7 overs to go, or maybe less than 6 to 7 overs to go, but that wasn't the case with Dambula. He was always coming up around the 8 to 10 over mark. So I don't know if he had a really bad tournament with the bat, but certainly as a captain and for leading a team like that, overall it like you said, it didn't help his cause as staying on as Sri Lanka captain. Barnaka Rajapaksa, I think, see, the thing with him is if you look at his career overall, he's had some really big highs, right? But in between those highs, he's also had really ordinary, performances. Just the type of dismissals, the type of innings he's played. I think that's one of the reasons why a lot of people still question his inclusion. Of course, there have been a lot of off the field issues as well. But if you look at his performances, you have some really, like the Asia Cup final. His knock was just an incredible knock, right? And then you have performances where you can't figure out what he was trying to do in that game, in that situation. So he'll be really disappointed. I hear he's not available for the ODI series against India as well. We don't know for sure because we haven't gotten the squads yet. But to me, that's disappointing with the World Cup coming up. I don't know what his reasons are if he has made himself unavailable, but that's disappointing, and you don't want to kind of see um, that kind of thing from one of your senior players. And when he's not performing in domestic leagues and he's not performing in T20 cricket, then the pressure on him is just mounting, right? Because you have to keep your name. You have to keep people talking about you. That's also part of how things work, right, with selection and
The
stuff
trick.
like that.
Yeah, it's he did put that statement out talking about not playing ODI cricket just after the World Cup when they were picking the squad for Afghanistan, right? But then he did, and he said he was taking a break, but then he did go away and play in the T10, and now he's obviously played the LPL. The statement talked about mental health. I don't want to belittle someone's mental health, but the message is I think is slightly confused of what he's trying to tell us, and I'm sure he's got his own reasons why he doesn't want to play ODI cricket. And I'm sure in time it will all come out like these things always do, right? Shall we take a quick break and let's look ahead? Let's talk about two things when we get back. Let's talk about the IPL draft, which didn't go particularly well for any Sri Lankans, and let's look ahead to the squad that might get selected for India as well.
If you love the language of cricket and want more, then head over to the 99.94 app and you can hear all of our podcasts and cricket commentary. We're adding new shows all the time and covering cricket series from all over the world. Be the first to hear all of our announcements by following us on social media at 9994DM. Welcome to Cricket's Conversation.
So Estelle, let's talk about the IPL draft first. Firstly, we should mention that there is a number of Sri Lankans already retained. Then there's 4 Sri Lankans, is it 4 or 5 already retained by various IPL teams, including Perera, who barely gets a mention when we talk about the squad. I don't think he played any LPL games,
No,
did he?
he's, I think, still recovering from injury.
You know,
so that's the reason why he didn't feature in the LPL.
Yeah. There will be Sri Lankans featuring in the IPL, but I was definitely expecting 1 or 2 to get picked up in the draft that we had in the last. I'm going to say the last few hours because I don't know what the time is. I don't know what day it is. All I know is
yesterday,
it's not
Mark.
Christmas Day yet when we're recording this. Yesterday. There you go. What are your thoughts on it? Because I thought Chamira should probably deserves another go. I thought he was really great for Lucknow last year, but maybe it's just the fact that he hasn't played much the last few months. And I think again that's what hampered Dilshan Madhushankar's chances of getting a contract, is that lack of fitness. And I'm still a little bit surprised that none of our other batters didn't get picked up as well. I think Mendes and Nissanka and Aslanka could probably be a little bit, probably feel a little bit unlucky not to have got picked up, right?
Just looking at the names that were put up for the mini draft, I felt like, like the 2 you mentioned, Chamira and Madhushanka, seemed like the best bets if you think about the IPL franchises and what they're looking for. Lahiru Kumar is another for me, But I think all three, definitely the first two, it's probably to do with injury, and that truthfully, like Dilshan Madhushankar, we've only seen him in the Asia Cup, right? We haven't seen him beyond
Yeah.
that. That's the only tournament he's played, like the full tournament of so far. Didn't even feature for Jaffna in too many games during the LPL. So I think it's fair that he hasn't been picked up. Chamira, I thought, was a bit unlucky. I thought he had a good season last time. And, he is definitely a value addition, particularly even with the bat coming lower down in the batting order. But I don't really think any of the others can, you know, have too many gripes about it. I think if Chamika Karunaratne had a good World Cup, he would have been picked up. Unfortunately he didn't. He had a terrible time. Uh, we spoke about Mendes, Nisanka. I think it's very tough to break into an IPL side as an opener because that's where they are looking to kind of slot in their local players. So tough to get in there. And I also think that someone like Shanaka could be a really valuable buy, but again, he hasn't shown any kind of form in the last couple of months. So I think there are a few promising names in there,
I
but
think
unfortunately, like they haven't put in any huge performances of late to kind of make them a must buy.
if you're batting, you've just got to be consistent, right? That's why I think, in a way, if you look at like the Sunker and Aslanka, in a way, they're the two that have got the hardest job to try and get a contract, right? Because they're the two players that domestically India produce the most of. But the reason why I think they might at some stage be in contention, just their sheer consistency, right? And I think you look at someone like Sharnika, he needs to have those. He needs to just be consistently getting those massive knocks. He needs to be going into the LPL and being the top run scorer by quite a distance. I think at this stage of his career to be able to get in, right? It's just because the competition for batting it seems to be just a lot more fit than there is for the bowlers, right? And hopefully, obviously I don't wish ill upon any players, but there will be injuries, there will be players who aren't able to get to the tournament, and that's when maybe some of these other players might find some of the other shrunken players might find themselves with an opportunity for the big money of the IPL and to go and work with in new other setups and learn different skill sets. Because I definitely think if you look at the players who've been there, the shrunken players who've been there, that they've all improved dramatically while they've been involved in the IPL. So if we can get as many players involved in the IPL, not just the IPL, but the other franchise tournaments around the world, then I think we're onto a winner. Let's talk about this India series. There is a squad that's kicking around the internet at the moment. I'm not sure how official that is or unofficial that is. Charmika's back in it. There is some debate online about whether on what role, if any, Dinesh Chandimal and Angelo Mathews should have, considering their performances in the LPL and also the fact that at the end of this year, potentially there is a ODI World Cup for Sri Lanka to play in, and they bring a wealth of experience in particularly in that format. What do you think, Estelle? Do you think we should be looking to bring back? I mean, Chandimal's been in and out of squads all year. Angelo Mathews hasn't featured in a white ball series since I think 2019, since the last ODI World Cup. Do you think it's right for those two to have a role? And if they're going down that route, what about Thisara Perera? I know he's officially retired. I'm sure you can talk him out of it if it comes to donning the national team jersey once again. Because I mean, of all the kind of senior players, he's the one that's won the LPL 3 times and has been, by all accounts, absolutely pivotal in bringing so many youngsters through at Jaffna.
Yeah, just on Chandimal and Mathews, right? I think, look, when Pramodi Vikramasinghe came in as chairman of selectors, and they made that call to leave out all the seniors and go ahead with a youth, like a youth centric plan. I thought it was brilliant. I think I was one of the few who did at that point, because it meant seeing guys like Dimut Karunaratne, dropped off from the ODI squad. But I felt like it was a positive thing, because Sri Lanka always, what they always do is basically a year before, or 6 7 months before the tournament, they're still figuring out how they want to line up, right? And you don't see that in a lot of the major, like the teams that are successful at tournaments. 1 year before the tournament, they basically have the like 15 to 20 who they know, and they have 6 to 7 slots in their team, maybe more, kind of decided. But Sri Lanka hardly ever does, right? Just thinking back to 2019, that squad was insane. It had Milindra Sirivardhana, it had Jeevan Mendes in it, Jeffrey Vandese was in it. Played just one game. Hasaranga was in the standbys, um, and that's because there was no proper planning. And what Sri Lanka cricket at that point should have done at the end of that tournament was maybe scrap everything and start from square one, building towards the 2023 World Cup, because that is the World Cup that Sri Lanka has the best chance of winning, right? It's in conditions we are familiar with, um, and where our players would be most comfortable in, right? But they didn't do that. And now again, 10 months out from the World Cup, we're still trying to figure things out. I think they need to decide. I think if Pramodia stays
Hold on,
on,
hold on.
yeah.
I think that's slightly unfair. I don't think that they're trying to figure things out. I think that the rough template that was set with the youth reset is still roughly there, because it's essentially it's kind of worked. And I think the question is do they need to sprinkle some of the older players in?
Salt and
And by
pepper.
sprinkle, I mean I picked up through. Yeah, I picked three there. I'm not sure all three make it, but I also look at the LPL and I go, well, Mathews and Perera and Thisara Perera and Chandimal were bigger standouts than three of the at least three of the other players that they could potentially replace. And I think that's what the selection is, right? I also think, because I think one of the problems with the team is that some players have a very defined role and decide, especially when it comes to batting, and other players don't, and some of the players tend to get lost. We talked about, essentially, I suppose one of the discussions could be, do you drop Bardaka and do you drop Sharnaka and replace him with Mathews and Perera? Right? I'm not saying that's a good idea, but you look at the LPL and that feels like a no-brainer, right? Decision to make on kind of current form. But I'm not saying, stop and restart everything. I'm saying, do you bring one? I
No,
don't
but
think
that's
there's no
essentially
situation where I don't think all
going
three of
back
them
to what
get selected.
they were doing, right? So that's what I was trying to say, was that they need to, if they want to go back on the youth only policy, then yes, maybe you look at someone like Angelo Mathews, or Dinesh Chandimal. My issue is he seems to be opening the batting, and there's obviously no place for him at the top of the order, not right now at least.
Yeah.
So then what is his role? But Mathews does bat in a position where Sri Lanka has kind of not been stable. So there may be an opening for him, but it all depends on what kind of uh, what your outlook is, or what your plan is going forward. Because I again think that if 2023 is coming up and you're not prepared, then maybe you look at the next tournament, right? Because what we always do is we go back to the old players. Oh, they've done this before, let's give them another opportunity. instead of maybe trying to build a team that can one day win a World Cup, maybe not this World Cup, but the next World Cup, which is what I thought England did back in, was it 2014, 2015? Yeah, 2015, right? 2014, Alistair Cook's last series was a 7-match series in Sri Lanka. And England was terrible. And I loved it because I went to watch the games. They were, completely outplayed. Mahelan, Sangakkara, Dilshan, everyone's playing, right? But what they did was they went into that World Cup, they completely outplayed, they got knocked out in the first round. But by then they were already putting the kind of the plans in place for the next World Cup. That's what Sri Lanka does not do. They don't plan ahead, and the coaches have 2 years with the team, and then they're, uh, told that they're done. So, what I feel is personally, I think Mathews is one of the best players Sri Lanka has ever produced. But unless he's bowling, I'm not sure that he fits into that side at the moment because I much prefer a team that we can see moving forward a couple of years um, than maybe just a team for the tournament and then you're done.
I'm just going to throw this out there. I'd love to see one of Mathews and Perera picked. And if both of them were picked, I don't know. I can't remember how big the squads are allowed to be for an ODI World Cup. I think it's 20, is it? Then I don't think that's the worst thing. And I kind of feel like the last few years since Durham, I do think that they've kind of definitely in T20 that they've kind of got a plan. I mean, it's maybe not panned out at the World Cup the way it was meant to, but it definitely panned out the Asia Cup the way it did. I mean, you could possibly argue that they plucked out Dilshan Madhushankar from absolutely from nowhere, and he comes and he's basically the star of the Asia Cup for Estelle, right? And yeah, it's interesting because I don't think there's a situation where Mathews is ever going to be able to bowl 10 overs in the game. Probably unlikely to bowl more than about three.
Yeah, he didn't bowl for Colombo either, did he?
Right. So,
which I think signaled kind of maybe that he's not also looking at, or he's not expecting a recall, because I think that's one of the things that Sri Lanka cricket may have kind of told him is that he needs to be bowling if he wants to make it into the 11. And he didn't, despite being the captain, he didn't bowl. So I don't know whether he's carrying an eagle. We don't know. But yeah.
I just think that the great loss for Sri Lanka cricket in the last 10 years has been Angelo Mathews' hamstrings, right? Because if he was the all-rounder, if he developed not developed, and I don't mean this is no way a slur to Angelo Mathews, but injuries have hampered his bowling, right? That's what's, if you go back and you watch his spells when he first broke into the team, you're like, wow, he's gonna he could be one of the absolute great all-rounders. And because injuries took his ability to bowl away from him, we were sadly he was bowling wise at least he was unable to fulfill that potential. So it's a real shame. And I think if you pick him, you're picking him for his leadership abilities and for his batting abilities. I don't think you might get the odd over here or there if suddenly you can't figure out who's going to bowl the 28th over, then give him the ball. But I don't think he's really a bowling option. Anyway, this is Sri Lanka. There'll be one wicket keeper and everyone else will be able to bowl spin, so it's fine. Estelle, let's leave it there. Before we do though, should we read some of the comments? Because I did put a tweet out several hours before we recorded, asking people to, who should get a mention. I think we've just about mentioned everyone, who, all the players. There was one message I didn't understand. It was from Nathan, who said, was a sad tournament overall, didn't showcase anyone competent to play the big league, which was clear when no one got selected in the IPL auction. Viakant and Sadira are the only players worthy of mention. Hopefully Lanka keeps politics away and chooses them for the national team. I think I was kind of perplexed by that. I think we're almost at a stage I'm not saying 100%, in Sri Lankan cricket where there's so much conversation around it now, and so much of it is televised and is able to view that if you put performances in, you will become part of the social conversation about getting selected for the national side. And maybe I'm being too optimistic, and I think there comes a point where if you're good enough, you will get selected. I think in a way that's how Balaka Rajapaksa came back into the side, because you just create this conversation around him about why he wasn't being selected. I do think, though, in terms of spinners coming into the side, I mean, Sri Lanka's two best players in the last 12 months have been Hasaranga and Thisara. So it's going to be difficult to break through for a young spinner. You've got to be really special.
Yeah,
You've got
and
to be
they had good
consistently special.
LPLs as well, right? Uh, sure, they
Yeah,
probably didn't make your team of the tournament, but both Tikshana and Hasaranga both had really good tournaments overall. Uh, I mean, if you're judging by the fact that Hasaranga was top wicket taker last time around, yeah, sure, he didn't perform, but I think overall both of them had good tournaments. Uh, just on being picked for the IPL also, it to me, it's not really how good you are, right? It's about in a particular squad what roles they have vacant. And if you have a leg spinning all rounder already, you're not picking Wanindu Hasaranga because you're not going to play two leg spinning all round. You're unlikely to play two leg spinning all rounders. Similarly, like if you had if you had four openers in your squad, you're not looking at Kusal Mendis or Pathum Nisanka. Even if they've had the best years of their life, they've top scored globally. You're not going to look at them, right? Because if you already have those options in your squad, so I wouldn't say not being picked in the IPL is necessarily a kind of a benchmark. It's just if you can offer something that a team is looking for, then I think you will be picked. Because unless you're like Hasaranga, right? Hasaranga obviously has kind of been amongst the top 3 to 4 spinners in the world in the last couple of years. So it's hard to look past him. Tikshana Tikshana and um, some of, why can't I remember his name? Tikshana offers something special,
Pathirana.
right? Pathirana, yeah. Both of them
Yeah.
offer something unique, right? So I don't think it's like you can't say, or you shouldn't be saying that, okay, uh, be this guy isn't, Lahiru Kumara isn't a good bowler because he didn't get picked for the IPL. It's just that there are certain things that those franchises are looking for that they want. And, when you see guys like Kane Williamson being picked, you think, how is this happening? But he's been consistent in the IPL, right? In the past seasons, he's obviously his value has gone down, but he's been consistent. So I'm not sure I agree with you, Nathan, but
It's
kind of
it's
understand where you're
it's like
coming from.
getting picked for the IPL. It's you just being good enough isn't the only criteria, right? You've got to expect a team to need your specific skill set, and then them to have a space for a foreign player as well.
Yeah,
Maybe
and be
SLC should get
available
onto the
for the
phone
whole
to
tournament. That's another thing, right?
maybe SLC should get on the phone to the BCCI and be like, can we have a special rule where every team is allowed one Sri Lankan player on
For
top of their
free.
foreigners as well? Just because obviously there's a special relationship between Sri Lankan cricket and Indian cricket as well. I just on that, I'd also like to see more Sri Lankan players play in the PSL, because it's interesting to me how many English players have played in the PSL and are now moving on to play in the IPL. I think it's one of those. It's just it's a league that people from the IPL spend a lot of time looking at as well. And clearly, and it sets players up nicely to go to move to other leagues. But let's see what happens with more Sri Lankan players playing franchise cricket. Right, Estelle, let's leave it over there. Firstly, I should say, if you do celebrate, Merry Christmas. I think this episode may end up going out on Christmas Day, which if you're eating your turkey, however you celebrate, hopefully you are listening to a bit of our LPL final review. Thank you for listening to Sri Lanka on 99.94, where we speak cricket every day. Please do rate, review, and subscribe wherever you enjoy your podcast. You can download the 99.94 app and follow us on Twitter. I'm at Mark Machado. Estelle is at Estelle_Vasu Day 1, as in the number 1. Never miss out. Join our 24/7 conversation on social media and follow us at 9994DM. Cricket every day, your way.